Hi, welcome back to my channel. I wanted to discuss trauma today. I previously was discussing trauma through abusive circumstances, but in general, I just want to speak on trauma. I actually haven't been um, uploading because I'm learning about some different aspects of trauma and how it works in different people's lives and how everyone is actually affected by trauma in one way or another. So all of our relationships are actually affected by trauma because there isn't anybody who hasn't been through a traumatic experience. Now, there are those who disregard trauma and its impact in their relationships or in their lives, or just don't want to do the work required to see where their trauma might be affecting their relationships. But you're going to have to deal with it because it's affecting you and how your relationship is working. Someone else's trauma is affecting your relationship. So that's basically what I want to talk on. So why does trauma matter? That's what I'm speaking about. So why do we need to heal from our trauma? Well, you don't need to heal from your trauma, but if you do heal from your trauma, you will experience a better quality of life. Keep that in mind. Better relationships, better use of your time. Getting to the bottom of your trauma now will save you much time and much pain in the future. Trauma can be an obstacle in the way of how we see the world around us. To clearly see the world and get the exposure we need to focus on things without trauma in our view. So every time we look at a circumstance or we become aware of something that's going on around us, we're categorizing it. And a lot of times we're seeing it through the lens of a past traumatic experience. So if you're in a relationship with somebody who hasn't dealt with their trauma and who doesn't realize they act out because of their trauma, then it's going to cause a lot of problems in your relationship. Now, if you understand that you do have trauma and the person that you're in a relationship with understands that you have trauma as well, then you can work through the trauma together and the relationship can actually be healing. So let's just say you are in the same situation, but you perceive the situation differently because you're looking through it through the lens of your trauma. Maybe somebody came up to you abruptly and the person you're with didn't see that as a problem because they're not looking through it through the lens of trauma. But when somebody comes to you abruptly and they're moving their arms around and I guess you're feeling a little bit um fearful because you've been in situations where people were very expressive with their arms and it turned into something else. Like they went from swinging their arms around to, cussing you out and then maybe attacking you. So you're on guard and you're waiting for something to happen. When that person who's with you can say, nah, that's okay. That's not really happening. Everything's fine. That person's just a little bit out of sorts right now, but there's nothing for us to worry about. So it can be really beneficial if you're with somebody who understands where you're coming from, because they've been through their own traumatic experiences and they can see that there could be a little bit of a problem happening, but things seem to be okay and that you're not going to have to worry about it turning into like something that you experienced that was a traumatic experience in your past. But you're viewing that already through that lens, so it's helpful to have somebody who understands your situation, understands your past, and can help you work through it. So something like that will actually help you to grow quicker, to be in a relationship instead of waiting to be in a relationship while you're trying to heal. So sometimes these relationships that you're in, as long as people understand where you're coming from, they can be influential in your healing. So that's an example. So you're seeing things through the eyes of your trauma. And so a lot of people, when you're having a circumstance or a difficult day with them, it could be that they're viewing things through the lens of the trauma they experienced in their life. So that's something for you to keep in mind so you can have healthier relationships. So you can kind of let some things slide under the rug a little bit because we don't really want to be on people every time they are feeling off or they have a bad day. Some things you just have to let them slide. It's a growing experience. They may even come to you and say, I'm sorry about that. I realize I behaved in a manner I didn't want to behave in. And then they're actually working through it by you not saying anything instead of actually kind of blowing it up and turning it into a new traumatic experience or one that ties into an old traumatic experience. So that's what I wanted to speak on. So these old traumatic experiences, when they come into play in a new experience and it becomes traumatic as well, they cause a tie like a link. So now every time that person gets into a situation with maybe that same atmosphere or the same people, they're already on guard for another traumatic experience. So that's why you see people act out a lot because they show up expecting to act out. So you can actually have that not happen if you can see things from the point of view that you may be having a traumatic experience instead of tying a new traumatic experience onto an old one. I don't know if that makes sense to you. If you can understand that the reason why you're upset about something, that something feels traumatic to you, is because you experienced something similar to it in the past, then you won't tie it into the new experience and create more traumatic experiences. Because that is definitely a cycle that people get into. They have a traumatic experience, and there's something that resonates with a new traumatic experience, causing the old traumatic experience to tie on to the new one. Mm. Trauma changes the world around us and fits it into another traumatic experience when we are trying to perceive the world through our traumatic experience. So it's like the traumatic experience is looking for cues to express itself so that you can work through it. So you can either work through it through these cues in a way like I spoke about with somebody who's compassionate and kind and understands what you've been through and can help you through it, or somebody that just doesn't say anything and lets you kind of work through it yourself and you realize, okay, the way that I acted must be from something else if you realize that you've had traumatic experience, which is really important for people to understand that other people have all had traumatic experiences and that you have your own traumatic experiences that may pop up, may cause triggers. And so if we can view people through that lens and just kind of like sit back and let them work through some of their own stuff, that can be really healing. Just you being there and letting them work through it, you know? And how can you know when you are viewing the world around you through traumatic experiences? You'll know because of how you feel. You'll feel off balance. You'll feel maybe some resistance, fear, or anger start to come to the surface, and then you'll realize, okay, something about this situation, something about maybe a smell, a person, there's something that's setting your brain off. There's some kind of a tie there from the traumatic experience to the trigger to the new experience that is causing you to reflect on the old trauma and to feel like you are in or entering in a new traumatic experience that is just basically tied into the old experience or going to play out in the same way that the first experience played out. And so you're living in fear of this traumatic experience. So to face it head on and to realize that it's not something to be afraid of, no matter how bad it was, I'm telling you, is not something to be afraid of because it's in the past and that's where it needs to stay. The only thing that you need to bring forward from your past is the idea that it's in the past and that's where it needs to stay. So if you can just put that traumatic experience in the past in your brain and realize that same experience isn't going to happen again. And if it is, it's very low percent that it will. So you don't need to find a a pattern for a new traumatic experience to keep creating traumatic experiences in your brain and in your body. Just end it and stop it as soon as you can. It's probably easier to view other episodes of trauma in others. So sometimes you can't see your own trauma. You don't realize that's what you're feeling. You're smelling something and you're getting a reminder, and your body might go into flight or fright or freeze, or flight or freeze or fright. And so your body's kind of transitioning because it feels like it needs to be safe, and somebody else is probably going to witness this happening. They'll witness the change in your body, the change in your mood. They'll tell that you're in fear. You might look a little paranoid, cautious, maybe not paranoid, but like overly cautious, ready for an event to happen. And so the people who are with you will see you acting out and expecting some traumatic experience to occur. So they'll see it in you maybe and you won't feel it. You won't know that that's what's happening to you. You won't actually know you're in a freeze state until you're in it for a little bit. You won't know what triggered you. So having people around you who can understand your past and just letting people know you have traumatic experiences is something you need to do. You be open about the fact that you have had traumatic experiences and that in certain situations, your post-traumatic stress disorder comes out or you're triggered, and then that'll help you work through a lot of your triggers because they'll be able to be on top of them so that you'll realize that's what you're going through right now. When you feel like you need a run, like someone will sense in you that you're a runner and they'll be like, okay, this person, when they feel uncomfortable, when they get triggered, they like to run. Well, that's your flight. So then somebody will realize, okay, this person likes to, like, they just disappear when things get uncomfortable because basically you were so traumatized in situations that become uncomfortable, like through chaos or conflict, that you just run. Well, that person uh, they won't confront you in a chaotic way and they won't push you off to run. They'll find a different way to confront you. Or they won't confront you at all because they know that you don't like conflict and they'll wait till things aren't confrontational and maybe like slide in the back door and say, what happened yesterday made you feel uncomfortable because things were getting confrontational, but we can like work through this without a conflict. And so they'll find a different way to work through things with you. And that will help you because they'll see the trauma in you first. So you'll be able to grow together and your relationship will be stronger because of it. And I'm really glad that you came back. And if you could like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. I'm going to keep working on trauma because I'm actually studying trauma, studying it on the field, studying it through books and through my own experiences. So I look forward to just continuing more with trauma. Have a great day.